So one of the biggest problems in Zimbabwe is that it's treated as a hobby or a sideline. Pedigree breeding, you can sell things for a higher price. So over thousands of years, cattle have been in this part of the world. So there's an interesting equation that sometimes people say that 10,000 hours of anything makes you an expert. In ideal conditions, I would like to calve once a year, but I don't have ideal conditions, and I think a lot of people in Zimbabwe don't have them. Some people will bull all year round, just leave the bulls in. That's okay, that's fine as well. Pedigree breeding requires you having a reputation as a breeder. And one of my big worries with the pedigree industry at the moment is if we don't keep our auction houses alive, like CC Sales, who does the National Bull Sale, how are we going to hold the National Bull Sale?
So when we are looking at cattle farming, it seems like it's a long-term investment.
Yes, so cattle farming is, I would always say, is a medium to long-term investment. I'm saying these must take this grass, that's the ordinary grass that's on the ground here, and produce it into gold in my pocket. That's what I want.
Grass into gold.
Okay, so that is our policy here. Pedigree breeding requires you having a reputation as a breeder. And that comes over a long period of time. And you achieve that by detailed management on the ground. Consistency, you have to have consistent performance all the time. From your staff, from yourself, from your management structures that you've got in place. You've got to, because remember, if you sell a bad bull to somebody, your reputation has gone out the window. So, because they will talk to their neighbors and say, I got a bull from Tuli stud and it wasn't very good, and then that's my name gone. So you have to have a consistent product all the time. So although you can sell your animals for a higher price, you can't do pedigree breeding unless you live on the farm. Some people have tried it and they don't live on the farm, but then you have to have a really good manager. And when I say a good manager, first of all, he's got to know what he's doing and be a good manager, and you have to give him the resources. Because a lot of people put a manager in place, but then they don't give him the dip he needs or the feed that he needs to put in at the right time.
Am I supposed to focus on one breed only, or I'm supposed to even focus on other breeds?
So there's an interesting equation that sometimes people say that 10,000 hours of anything makes you an expert. And if you're putting 10,000 hours in, if I'm putting 10,000 hours into Tulis, I get there quicker to be an expert at them. If I'm trying to now split myself between Tulis and Brahmins, and I'm putting 5,000 hours into Brahmins and 5,000, it's going to take me double the time to be an expert. Also, so for me, it's better if you focus on one thing. Having said that, some people do a number of breeds and they do it well, but understanding that you need a lot of resource because you can't mix the cattle. When we've put the bulls in, we can't put the Brahman bulls in the Tuli unless we're doing commercial breeding. Pedigree breeding, you have to have separate breeding herds, and you have to have separate herds for separate genetics. How many of us have access to beautifully laid out farms with paddocks where we can separate out all the different bulls into different herds and different breeds into different herds? It's not a common thing in Zimbabwe anymore. Managing different breeds together, you can use some tools like AI and that sort of thing, but it all depends on your structures that you've got on the ground and the resources that you've got on the ground to do it.
It seems like you don't encourage phone farming, you encourage people to be on the ground.
Biggest mistake people make with cattle farming is that people treat it as a side hobby. I'll just buy a few cattle and put them out in the musha with my gran or my aunt and they will make me money, If you're going to do cattle, you've got to think of it as a crop. You've got to have a plan. You've got to sit down and decide, like if I say, right, I'm going to grow some maize, I decide, do I want long-term maize? Do I want short maturing maize? What is my soil like? Where should I put my land in? What's my access to water? No different to cattle. This is my farm. What's my grass like? What's my management like? What breed should I buy for that farm? Once I do that, then I look and say, okay, so your maize, you'd say, right, how close do I plant the plants together, the population? If I put them too close, there's not enough nutrition for the cobs to form. If I put them too far apart, I'm wasting land. Same as cattle. I've got a piece of ground. How much shall I stock it? How many cattle should I put on that piece of land to make sure that I'm getting maximum productivity at a minimum input? So this is why we talk about, I don't like high density grazing. So this is what we call sauerfeld grass. So this grass here, very nutritious. This is like cardboard for cattle. They will die. They will almost die if that's all they have to graze. Short green growing grass.
When I'm looking at this one, the color, I'll probably think that that's not a Tuli.
So it is a Tuli. So the genetics are all true to type. So reasons like some of the ivory ones do get very pale skin, and that's not good for this environment, so we tend to cull those out. So we don't want a very big cow producing a small weaner. The smaller the cow and the bigger the weaner, the more productive we are. I don't really have a preference. I mean, I will use, if it's a really good bull and it ticks all the right boxes, I'll use whatever color. So funny enough, Mashonaland people tend to go to the darker animals. Matabeleland people tend to go for the lighter animals. The National Bull Sale, you're going to struggle to sell an ivory bull on the National Bull Sale. So I have to just keep an idea that we don't get too many of the ivory color in. We don't need that. It doesn't need to dominate, So
why is that?
Just the market. Sometimes that's why actually we're doing the dissertation so I can confidently say to people, look, there is no difference. Having said that, I'll have people who live in very hot climates who come to me and say, I mean, you imagine standing in the sun and I say you can either wear this big black jacket or this big white jacket. Which one are you putting on?
Probably put on the white, not the
white
black one.
Because it reflects the heat. So if you're living in the low veld in 40-degree temperatures, you should be buying an ivory bull because his coat is going to be lighter, instead of a dark one like this,
Did it ever cross your mind to do dairy?
Once or twice I thought about it, but it's a whole different profession, I think.
It's different, way different.
Way different, and it's extremely intensive. And I think if pedigree breeding is intensive dairy, you have to really, your disease control is so important, and your breeding, it's like all the things. I think you have to learn how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. You talked about reputation in breeding. I mean, a lot of people around who are doing business, especially farming these days, they are not protecting their reputation. They just do things, and then tomorrow the client is angry at them.
Yeah. So you do need to. I mean, it's a simple economics for me. If I don't look after my customers, they're not going to come back, and if they don't come back, I don't sell any bulls. So it's very important to look after your customers, and it's not just looking after. I mean, it's giving them a reasonable deal.
Yes.
You need to make money. They need to get to buy a good product.
Yes.
It's to make sure that the product you give them works. The thing with the Tuli is that it comes in a polled version. And polled means it will never grow horns.
Oh, okay.
So if you're a commercial breeder and you have to dehorn your calves all the time, it's a job to do. But if I sell you a polled bull and you can start to have animals that produce no horns on farm, it's one job less to do. So it's one of the natural gifts that the Tuli give you is their polled animals.
So why did you choose Tuli?
So when I first got into cattle, I didn't know too much about them, so I had to do research. And as I said, I'm not a person who's got lots of money, so I needed to educate my kids and afford lots of things. So we put and when my husband and I sat together and spoke about farming, we said the cattle needs to educate the kids. That's what its job was.
Oh, wow, that's nice.
So it has to make money. That is the most important thing. So you can look at all the breeds you like, and you can say that one looks pretty and that one looks muscular and that one looks handsome, but which one makes me money? 3 indigenous animals breeds we have here. The Tuli is the biggest of the indigenous breeds. All breeds are good breeds. There is no bad breed of cattle.
I was going to ask that question.
And I run ZHB, which represents all the pedigree breeds, so I can put my hat on and say there are no bad breeds. But you must identify the breed that is going to work best on your farm in your management systems.
Wonderful.
And indigenous cattle will cost you less money because they are naturally adapted. They will resist disease better. They're not totally immune to disease, but they will resist it better. So I have seen these cattle in the snow in South Africa and in the hottest areas. And you'll see that some of them have got this quite light coat.
Exactly.
So it's quite interesting when you talk to the Matabele people. So I don't know if you know the story behind Len Harvey.
No, I don't.
So Len Harvey started the Tuli breed. When he says started it, he identified it.
Oh, okay.
It was already here, as explained, for 5,000 years and had been run in the area with mixes and of little bits and pieces coming in. But as you can see, apart from the different colors, the shades of the colors, it's a very uniform breed.
Exactly.
He was put in charge at that time, it was Rhodesia days, he was put in charge of the rural areas and improving the cattle production in those rural areas. And so they brought in Hereford bulls and they died. And they brought in Angus bulls and they died. And they brought in Simmental bulls and they died because they were trying to improve the cattle in the rural areas.
Yeah.
And eventually Len Harvey said, in all my travels around there, I've seen that there is this breed of cattle in the low veld that is this golden color that seems to do very well. Why are we trying to bring something new in when they've already got something? Let's improve what's already on the ground.
That's amazing.
So he put that forward to the government at the time, who gave him started the Matopus research station and said, right, bring in some cattle. And so he went around identifying the best bulls. So the first bull he identified was Guyu, and he then brought in females, and they set up the Tuli Research Centre on the Tuli Research at Tuli is the Tuli Research Centre. Then the Civil War broke out, and they moved them to Matopus because they were worried about them being out where they are. And at that stage, they were breeding up bulls and putting those bulls back into the rural areas, which were then adapted to the areas already, and they did very well. But he was identifying scientifically, which we're going to get to in a bit, the better performing ones, which the people on the ground couldn't do because they didn't have the technology to do it. Yeah. So he was working with them to improve what they already had. The commercial breeders, who are clever then, looked and said, I want some of those, because that's going to make me more money than running animals that are costing me a lot more on the ground. Because remember, making money is not just what you sell your animals for. How much did it cost you to get you there? Oh. And farmers often forget that. They are very proud of the National Bull today to say, I had the highest price bull.
Exactly.
How much did it cost you to get that bull? How much did it cost me?
Good point. Good question.
I know how much my Tuli cost me, and I had a Tuli stud and a Brahman stud. I ran the two studs together. Yeah. And I had to give up one when we moved here. We've moved about 7 times because I just couldn't, I didn't have the areas to hold the different studs and manage them. You know, you've got to keep the two separate, and I don't have the infrastructure on the ground to do that. So I had to give up one. The Brahman make money, but the Tuli make me more money because they cost me less money. So, and the Brahman are a good animal. We mustn't ever forget that every breed is a good animal.
Yeah, exactly.
But for me personally, with what I have to work with in my management structures, these make me the most money.
I really want to go back to this question, stock theft. How best can we handle?
So it's difficult to control. The government has put very strict measures if you catch somebody. They are the strictest in the world if they catch them, but you've got to catch them. What we have found is if you lose one animal, you have got to chase that down, however you do it, until you catch it, that person. Because if somebody comes and takes one animal of yours and they don't get caught, they're going to come back and take another one, and they're going to come back and take another one. And that goes down to, so our cattle guys, Johannes Langton over there, they know every one of these animals. They've got an ear tag in, and every morning they tick every single animal, and they phone me immediately that one is not there here, so that by 8 o'clock in the morning we would know if one had gone missing overnight or during the day. Most of the time it's got out the pen and it's gone wandering around the farm and we find it, but we look very hard. From immediately we know that it's missing, we search, and if it is stolen, we will mobilize our whole guard force. We get the district involved, we get the police involved, we get the veterinary involved, we put out rewards until we find that animal, because that then just says to the thieves and the robbers, don't bother those people, because they're going to come after you very hard.
What makes people to fail in cattle farming?
Right, so that's a very big question, very big, and I wrote a few things down just to remind me on that one. So one of the biggest problems in Zimbabwe is that it's treated as a hobby or a sideline. Now, if you were a grocer and you bought a store, how many hours would you spend in that store to make sure that it ran properly? Checking on your stock, checking on your customers, checking on your products, stopping the theft. You would be there 16 hours of a day.
Exactly.
If you were a lawyer, would you be sitting in your house in Harare while the court case was going on? You would be on the farm.
Yes.
So cattle farming is no different to any other business, and people seem to think you can do it, you can make money out of it by just having it. Now, it's interesting in Africa, well, Zimbabwe I'll talk about because I can't speak for other countries, but people have cattle for different reasons, and you've got to first of all understand why you are owning cattle. Is it a hobby? Am I a very rich person who just thinks, you know what, I've got a bit of land, I'd like to have a few cattle, so when I go out there for the weekend I can look at some nice cattle? That doesn't need to make him any money. He just wants that as a hobby, as something to look at. Like somebody might have dogs or chickens, he wants to have some cattle to look at. So his business structure will be very different to somebody else's business structure. In the rural areas, a lot of people keep cattle because it's like a bank balance. So he doesn't have his money in the bank, the guy on the small scale rural areas. So he might not worry that his cow's not giving him a calf every year, because as long as it's alive and putting on weight, that's his bank balance when he needs it, because somebody's in hospital or he needs school fees or he needs to buy his maize seed. So he has a different reason for keeping cattle. I myself, I need it, it's my business, I need it to make money. That's how I buy my groceries,
yes,
educate my kids.
Yeah.
So now I have to run it as a business. Now it needs to make money. So one of the things I need to talk about is the industry that we're operating in. Just so people understand how important it is that you really do your business plan well.
Yeah.
Currently in Zimbabwe, we're under a lot of economic stress. I think everyone knows that.
Yeah, indeed.
And then a lot of people just focus on themselves. In other words, I bought my 5 head of cattle, I put them on my farm. In the meantime, in the background, we've got lots of issues going on. We've got disease running around this country. We've got stock theft. We've got transport issues. We've got the new VAT issues that have come out. All of these things affect all of us farmers, from whether you've got 1 animal to 1,000 animals. We can only address if we all get together and join an organization. So one of the reasons people fail is they don't get involved in the bigger industry.
Oh.
So whether you are a pedigree breeder, in which case you join your breed society and get active on the committee,
yes,
or you join the Zimbabwe Beef Producers Society and get active as a voice and a representative for your district, or whether you set up a small group in your area with local farmers around and start helping each other, and then bring that forward to the relevant bodies, your farmers unions, whoever it is, you need to get involved. The VAT issue is every sale that now goes through has 15% on top of it.
Hey.
So if I've got a bull and I want to sell it to you for $1,000, and you've budgeted $1,000 in your pocket, and you come to buy that bull, it's going to cost you $1,150. So instead of going to the National Bull Sale to buy a bull for $3,000, which is now going to cost you $4,000, you're going to say, let me just quietly go under the table and go and talk to the farmer on the ground. That seems to be okay on the, you think, okay, well, somebody can make some money, but one of the big issues is that the government doesn't get the revenue it needs. The second issue that comes up, there's no control on disease.
Yes.
It puts cattle farmers very vulnerable to the fact that you are, you've now got buyers who you can't have competition in the market, because when I go to the auction sale, if I've got a really good bull like some of these here, I've got 10 people who want to buy that bull and they're all bidding on it. I can get my price up. If I have to sell it under the carpet to somebody, then I just have to take the price I get given, because how else am I going to advertise it? I can't put it in the open market because I'm illegally trading. But if people can't if they can't run their businesses because they're having to pay this 15% on top, so what happens is the buyer has to pay the 15%, so he drops the price to me. He'll only pay me $850 because he's only got $1,000 in his pocket. So I go home as the seller with $150 less.
Hey.
Or he buys the product from me at the right price, but then he has to put the price up. So say you buy my steer and now you want to put it in the butchery and sell it. You sell it at 15% more to the customer who comes through your door, so the meat price has gone up. Now, we need to talk to government about that and address those issues, because it's affecting all of us. So we all need to get involved. It's only because I'm in the industry that I know what happened. But if we don't give ourselves a voice and speak to the government, we'll have lots of issues. And one of my big worries with the pedigree industry at the moment is if we don't keep our auction houses alive, like CC Sales, who does the National Bull Sale, how are we going to hold the National Bull Sale? It's an iconic thing that Zimbabwe does as our National Bull Sale. It's unlike any other sale in Africa or the world, I think.
And it's a good thing.
It's a great place to come and get really good genetics, advertise our breeds. If we don't have an auction house, how are we going to hold that? And that ZHB, Zimbabwe Herd Book, is funded. Half of the funding that comes in comes through the National Bull Sale. If we don't have the National Bull Sale, how does ZHB operate without half their funds?
That's a problem.
They have to ask the pedigree breeder to pay in. Can I afford to pay in? Can I run my business anymore if I'm paying in extra money?
So you're saying that the people that are making decisions for cattle farmers are not actually involved with cattle farmers. They don't take you guys and sit down and say, we want to do this. What do you think about it?
Yes, so there's, we can blame them if we want to, but we, the cattle farmers, we need to organise our representation. How are we? So yes, the government aren't talking to us, but who can they talk to? Who is this person? Who is the voice for cattle in the country?
That's a good.
So that's what I'm saying to people, is that we can put blame on other people, but we need to say, if we have an organisation where we're all represented from, and it's important that every single person, from the people who own 5 head of cattle in Gokwe South, to somebody who runs a massive big ranch with 2,000 hectares, to the meat producers, to the abattoirs, it's important that we get together and have one voice. So when government need to know something, we can put our hand up and speak to them, because we're trying to talk to government about the VAT issue at the moment, but the problem is government don't know who I'm representing unless I've got a legitimate body that is recognised. So the ZHB represents pedigree cattle.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe Beef Producers Society is trying to be a voice for all cattle breeders, and there are some other voices in the unions out there, but it's all disparate at the moment. There's not one common voice. So we're trying to get everyone together with one common voice. I mean, you're already in a very difficult footing to start a business in cattle breeding unless we have addressed some of these issues on the ground. And the issues that an organisation like this needs to address is stock theft.
That's a problem.
It's a big problem. And you know, you come out overnight and you've got 10 of these slaughtered. That's my profit gone for the year.
Yeah.
Disease. Herds in this area that I have personally witnessed. We saw 14 animals die in the Dunga overnight with tulariosis. The major cause of that was lack of dipping properly, because the farmer was not on the ground and never sent the dip out to the poor guy who's trying to manage it on the farm. Be aware that we don't want it to transmit to other animals. And there's many things that can kill cattle. And he lost 67 head of cattle to disease within 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
6 weeks, 67 head of cattle, of which 14 died overnight in the Dunga. We eventually had to hire TRB to come and bury the cattle because they were rotting. And it was a terrible thing to witness. So, and that's just lack of. So somebody who's bought some cattle, put them out on the farm, doesn't really have the time or the inclination to manage them properly. And management takes coming out to the farm regularly, making sure that if you're not on the farm, that the person on the farm knows what they're doing, is committed to being there, and has the right product, the dip to dip when they need to, and the treatments, because tulariosis can be stopped. With proper dipping and with proper treatment, we can stop it. But if we have illegal movement of cattle and no dipping, and the thing is, you also put a big threat on your neighbours, because if you have got rampant tulariosis, is a tick that lives on a brown ear tick, and the danger with tulariosis is if one of these animals get tulariosis and I treat them and they recover, they carry that tulariosis. When another tick bites them, they can transmit it to another animal. So if I'm not dipping properly and making sure that my cattle are clean of ticks, I'm a threat to my neighbour who may not have had tulariosis. And so you go down the line. And if you let your cattle stray around everywhere covered in ticks, and they go into people's farm covered in ticks, so they're dropping disease everywhere for everyone around them. So not only are you costing yourself, I mean, how that person could afford to lose 67 head of cattle without reacting to it, without having, you know, if I lose one animal, we do a full post-mortem. We try and identify what killed that, because whatever it is, we need to treat it immediately.